Morning. Good to see each of you here. Sometimes we fear where we live, and maybe this morning was it. Got a bit of snow last night, and it sounds like we're going to have more coming. This is a little different sometimes with how we do things. With it used to be all in person. If you didn't make it to church, you didn't make it to church. Now we have other means of getting the word out, and I appreciate that, especially with the sickness we've had over the last months. That's changed the way we all respond to work and to family and to our neighborhoods. But there's one person that I see that has been out for some time. They moved to Washington, and that's George. But every week I see a howdy down at the bottom of one of our feeds, and so I would howdy George back. It's nice to at least hear that much from him. In our scripture this morning, John chapter 13, I appreciate, if I can find some glasses, someone made a shirt without a pocket in it. And I think that's all wrong. And every time I wear this shirt with no pocket, I think I'm going to throw it away as soon as I get home. But instead, I have it laundered and I hang it back up, or someone hangs it back up, and I find it again and think, that's a nice color. So I wear that shirt again with no pocket. I think this is the last day for this shirt. This got to go. I appreciate Adrian reading the scripture reading of John chapter 13, and I'd like to look that back up. John chapter 13, and to add to that a little bit, John 13, 34 and 35. And I like this. It reminds me of a sermon that Linda gave a while back when she spoke of commandments, and she titled her sermon a job description, and I like that. But this, a new commandment I give you: love one another. That's an interesting thing that we have to be reminded of that somehow. To love one another as I have loved you. No, that comes to the hitch, doesn't it? As we compare now, it's not enough just to love one another, but to love as God has loved us. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples. And then, if we were to turn to John chapter 21. Just a few pages back, John chapter 21, and this is another verse that we're familiar with. And Peter is being asked by Jesus, do you love me? And it's interesting that Jesus is asking Peter that, because wasn't too long ago that Peter was in a position and Jesus was saying to the disciples, who do men say that I am? And Jesus said, well, some say you're such a prophet, or you're this one. And he says, but who do you say that I am? And he says, the Christ. So at that point, Peter had recognized that this is God in front of us. This is the Christ. And so here it is. He had denied his Lord, and now Jesus, having been resurrected, says, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And then the third time he said to him, and this is verse 17, the third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Now, kind of interesting that feed my sheep. And then we wonder, who are his sheep? And do we have a responsibility in this verse? Or is it something that was just for Peter? You know, we sometimes think if we love someone, if we care for someone, there's some kind of a responsibility that comes along with that, some kind of, we have to show that care to them. And then we have a fear that sometimes with some of who we see, if we're to be a caring person, a good Samaritan, if we were to help someone, what if they take advantage of us? What if they do something or what we do for them and they don't respond as we think they should? But there's a story that Jesus tells, and it's one well known inside and outside of the church. The Good Samaritan. We know that, but I'd go over that a little bit with you, just not reading it here, but in my own words, pretty much. But a lawyer stood up and he's going to test Jesus. And he says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And that's an interesting beginning of the question. A lawyer looking for a loophole, maybe. And Jesus said to the lawyer, "Oh, what is written in the law? What do you read there?" And the lawyer answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And the lawyer wasn't a dummy. And he was obviously a devout and intelligent man. And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, Luke tells us the lawyer pressed Jesus farther. And who is my neighbor? And Jesus told one of the best stories in all of literature. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell into the hands of robbers, and who stripped him, they beat him, they went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, and when he came to the place, he saw him, and he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him, and he bandaged his wounds, and having poured oil and wine on them, then he put him on his own animal, and brought him to an inn. And he asked them to take care of him. And he says, "I'm going away. But when I come back, if the cost of taking care of this gentleman have exceeded what I have given you, I'll pay the difference. Whatever you spend." And then Jesus turned the question back on the lawyer. Says, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber?" And then the lawyer responded, "The one who showed him mercy." When Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." That's powerful. Go and do likewise. Powerful and disturbing. I'm not going to ask you to hold your hand if you've ever passed someone up who is in need. If you've ever seen someone needing something and not responded in a way that you wish you had. I remember Carol and I were in California, I believe it was, and we were on an on-ramp, and there was a gentleman sitting over wherever, and he had a sign. I don't even remember what the sign was, but it indicated that he was hungry. And we drove past, and we talked about it, and decided maybe we ought to turn around there. Back we turned around and go back to where he was, and offer him some of our oranges anyway. And so we did. Turned around, went back, and he was gone. And we wish that we had responded when we had that opportunity. In 1990, and this goes back a few years, there was a gentleman named Michael Peterson. And he was asked to appear on a morning talk show in Toronto, Canada. And he had agreed to it. And at the end of the first day of taping, he was on his way back to his plush high-rise apartment or his hotel room. He saw something that he hadn't seen before. Lying on the sidewalk in a bit of snow against the building was a man sleeping with only a cardboard blanket. And that disturbed him, and that man being completely exposed to the freezing cold. But what really bothered this gentleman was that as he looked farther, the man under the cardboard had no shoes or socks on. And he thought about maybe he should do something. But the light changed and there was traffic behind him, and he continued on thinking about this. He got to his hotel room and soon forgot about it. Several days later, he was in doing some more taping. He was in that room they call the green room. He's sitting there having coffee and a Danish, and all the other important people had left, and the janitor was there helping out, and he'd seen the janitor every day pretty much, and the janitor never had much to say. Good morning, sir, or is there anything I can get for you, sir? Or, whatever. He was just a polite person, and he asked him how his day was going. He says this man told him that he'd been having to ride his bike to work in the snow, and that he'd been feeling rather sorry for himself. That is, until he saw a man sleeping on the sidewalk under a piece of cardboard with no shoes and socks. Michael Peterson, he says he almost choked on the Danish as he heard this man go on to relate how he was so moved with compassion that he went around the corner to a store and he bought some shoes and he bought some socks for this. Well, as Peterson listened to the man tell the story, he saw a poster in his mind that used to be in an old friend's bedroom when he was a teenager. There was a picture of a child hanging somewhere a flower. And the caption read, "The smallest deed always exceeds the grandest of intention." Wow. Now that's good, isn't it? The smallest deed always exceeds the grandest of intentions. How many times, I thought I was going to do something. I had plans for doing something, but then I get to my hotel room and soon I forgot. Peterson said he stood there wishing that it was he who had bought the shoes and socks for the man. As they concluded the interview and his time was up, he thought of something that Mother Teresa said. And it was that none of us can do anything great on our own, but we can all do a small thing with great love. When Peterson went home that day, he looked for the man on the street. He was gone. But he knew that he'd be replaced, maybe not on the same street, maybe not the same sidewalk, maybe not that same winter, but he knew. And we've all been there. I'm not trying to increase any of our guilt level, but I like that story of Jesus and the care that he showed in the story of those three people who walked that road. And I wonder where I was on that. Feed my sheep. That's what I think. Am I looking for a loophole? But I gotta get some glasses. I brought them. When I was 4 years old, we made a trip down the Alcan from here in the interior of Alaska down through Canada to California. And I liked that trip. 4 years old, I thought pretty familiar with Alaska, but I had no idea about California. We were going down there in the wintertime. I didn't think fall ever ended in California that winter. It was just like this. Pretty cool. My grandfather, I thought, lived on a farm. It there was everyone around there had dairy at that time, and later turned to orchards and now it's vineyards. But at the time, it was mostly dairy. And he had a couple of cows. One of them was named Twinkle. I don't remember the name of the other one. But it was the rain that would come in, and that gray layer of clouds that just hung low, and then some mornings there would be a bit of fog. I remember the chill that was in that, kind of a wet cold. And I was introduced to the sound of a chainsaw as they cleared land, some of the oak in that area, to make room for more pasture. To hear a chainsaw now, to me, in the fall time, that little bit of a chill, it takes me 4 years old right back to California. I'm there again. But I noticed something that on a chilly winter morning in California, they had these blue-bellied lizards that were there that would come out to warm themselves if there was any chance of sun. And I discovered that a 4-year-old boy is quicker than a cold lizard. I got one of them. And I is my pet then, because I had them, and I got a box of them, and I put them under my bed. A pet lizard, and a blue-bellied lizard at that is quite a prize. Until my grandmother told me some days later that, Bobby, you got to let that lizard loose. He's going to starve to death. Well, there was something I hadn't considered. So I took my pet, and I'm not going to take him out and just turn him loose into the wilds out there. I'm kinder than that. I took him into the barn to the milking parlor where Twinkle Toes and this other cow was, that I could turn my pet loose in there and not be rained on. And I had him clutched in my right hand, and I gently went to throw him across the room. And as I released him, he bit onto my finger, onto my index finger. And the words of my grandmother came back to haunt me. Bobby, you're going to starve that thing to death. And I realized he was solving the problem right there on the end of my finger. He was going to eat me. And I went to waving my hand like a horsewhip on a stagecoach. And as I was waving my hand, as that lizard approached the speed of sound out there, he let loose. I never saw where he landed. I was out the door and gone. Left my lizard there, and I thought, that feed my sheep is pretty important. Pay attention. The heart of authentic faith is love. Well, the first thing we need to see is that when Jesus asked the lawyer, what is written in the law, the lawyer answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and your neighbor as yourself. And that's the very center of our faith. It's the very center of the Jewish faith. The great commandment was not something new to them, but to this gentleman. Jesus wasn't seeking to introduce something new into the Jewish faith. It was already there. The problem is with religion that many times it's easy to major in minors, to neglect what is fundamental. So it's no accident that Jesus chose a priest and a Levite, and he wasn't trying to make their faith look bad. Jesus had no reason to do that. Jesus was a Jew. From birth to death, he lived and died a Jew. Those people could have been members of any church in any country, in any denomination. Just because you're a religious professional does not mean that you possess a heart full of love. Notice that the priest and the Levite, like the Samaritan, were going down from Jerusalem. Surely they had seen that gold dome, stepped inside, and heard words that stirred their heart, felt that they had been close to the very presence of God. They had fulfilled their religion. They felt good about themselves. And suddenly the hollowness of their religious commitment was exposed. They had fulfilled the first half of these commitments. They had loved God. But passing down the road, they came upon that dread scene by the side of the road, where a fellow Jew, badly beaten and nearly dead. If the Samaritan had been robbers, they might have been justified in their negligence, since most Jews did not regard Samaritans as neighbors. Their only responsibility came in some of their interpretations of the law that was only to love another Jew. But this man laying beside the road was their neighbor, and they knew it, and they still passed it by. They may have been real stars in their temple or synagogue. They may have read the Torah with eloquence and conviction, but they were miserable failures with regard to the second commandment. So I speak with the tongue of men and angels, says Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, and have not love. I'm a sounding gong or a cymbal, clashing cymbal. Love is the heart of faith. In particular, it's the heart of the Christian faith. You know, it'd be absurd to think that only Christians know how to love. Some of the most loving people in the world are Jews or Hindus, Baptists, followers of Muhammad. But there are many people who don't follow Jesus. Love is the center of faith for many people in the world. But it is unique for Christians. Because I don't know of any other religion whose God has scars in his hand. Scars from having hung. I remember Jim and Dave Burrows sang a song here. And I don't know the song to sing it to you, or I would. Good thing I didn't learn it. It was when he was on the cross, I was on his mind. I was on his mind. The love that God has for each of us is tough to imagine, hard to imagine. You know, it's hard for me to imagine the love I may have for that which is immediate, that which is around me. How do I love my wife? How do I love my family? How do I love my children? And I think, how do I love my neighbor? Feed my sheep. It's easier to put them under a bar, put them in a box anywhere. Why did Christ go to the cross? Because of love? That's amazing. Were we deserving? I don't speak for you, but I know my life, and I know I wasn't. I'm not deserving. Quite the opposite. But he went to the cross because we were helpless. We were laying beside the road. We were loved. We were about to breathe our last breath, and God saw us lying there and had mercy on us. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. How much does God love us? No other God has scars on his hands from stopping to help a stranger beside the road. Love is the heart of faith, particularly the followers of Jesus. And then that brings us to one of the final things he said. Jesus' love is the hope of the world. It's amazing. We still live in a world of ancient hatreds, a world of which might continues to make right. There's still a world where an eye for an eye is exchanged for a tooth, and we cannot see this as a formula. Can we not see this as a formula for a disaster? what is the answer to the world's most profound needs? I want to tell you one more story about a man that I just came across, a young man named Bobby. An interesting story. I struggled with it as I heard it, but the first time that anyone told Bobby they loved him, he was 12 years old. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine living 12 years of your life without anyone ever saying they loved you? Ever feeling it? Bobby's mother was 15 when she gave birth to him. She was in I think, Bangor, Maine. And after when she came home, and she told her stepmother that she was pregnant, he ran around the house and she wandered the street for a while, and then ended up finding a home for unwed mothers. She gave birth to Bobby. And sometime after that, she found a man who was on a military base there in France. They got married, and he got transferred or stationed in Washington State, and so they moved across the country. And shortly after that, then he received assignment to Germany and then other spots around the world. And she stayed behind with her son and continued her life of partying, and she had 5 more children by different men. And Bobby says that he was left home alone many times to care for the other children. He was the caregiver for them while she was out, and she'd be gone sometimes for days and sometimes for weeks, and they slept all in the same bed. Talks about how cold the room could be, and that all 6 of them in that bed, they were bedwetters, and that he said occasionally that was a relief, but temporarily some warmth to the bed that they're at. But it was early on years ago, and they were still delivering milk. And he said that they'd go out and steal milk off the back porches. And they had ketchup to make sandwiches. And whenever their mother would come home, if she brought a boyfriend, it was oftentimes they were abused, molested. When Bobby's father, who wasn't his father, came home from service and found this, he became angry and he grabbed a belt and he beat Bobby's mother, and that led to the welfare people coming, and they placed the children in foster homes. One day, someone showed up in a party that had adopted Bobby's sister and I think one of his other siblings, and drove off. And as they drove off, Bobby ran after him, trying to come back, and ran up, and then he fell down, crying. And as he lay there crying, he got up with mud on his face from the tears in the church. And he stood up and he shook his face with his fist in the air, and he said, "If there is a God, I hate you." It's an interesting thing. It says that as he said that, at that moment, sitting in an office, looking at a book, talking to a welfare agent, was a lady who says, "I want to adopt a boy." couple named Arnold and Mary Peterson wanted to adopt him. And the authorities tried to discourage him, that you don't want to adopt these children, any children. They're damaged goods. School records noted, this boy needs to be institutionalized. He'll never amount to anything. But the moment that Arnold and Mary Peterson met Bobby, they determined to make him part of the family. Mary wrapped her arms around Bobby and spoke those words that he'd waited 12 years to hear. Bobby, I love you. Years later in college, when Bobby heard the campus pastor say that God had chosen us to be part of his family, he knew how special that offer is, and he responded. So he gave his life to Christ. But this man is now a retired pastor from another denomination. A retired pastor, a college professor, an author, and he'll never amount to anything. God changes lives. And the interesting thing is that if God changes lives, we don't have far to go. Because each one of us sees us on the side of the road. We recognize ourselves in that story. We know what we've done, we know how we've been abused. And we felt the touch of God. We felt Him possess us. And we heard Him say, "Take care of them. Whatever the cost, I'll pay it." Love each other. Love one another. Who we have, who I have, hid in the box under the bed, but starving to death. The word we speak, the deed we do. Being mindful of one another. It isn't the 3-hour sermon. It could be the 3-word sentence that changes the life. Let's be careful in how we treat one another and recognize that God cares for each of us, so much so that He sent His Son.